Maui faces immeasurable damage from unprecedented wildfires, Book Talk is trying to lend a hand with the Read for Maui Challenge. From August 14th to August 28th, readers are challenged to read as many works by Hawaiian authors as possible to raise money for organizations and mutual aid funds aiming to help the denizens and businesses of Maui. Before we get properly started, I'd like to give a shout out to Talk About Maui and Sim Kern on TikTok for making me aware of this challenge. Welcome to Retelling the News! I'm here with our good friend of the show, Shamila Karanakaran, and we're basically throwing this episode together to show our support for the hashtag Read for Maui Challenge, partially by providing some suggestions of books to read that are also the sorts of books that we talk about on this here podcast. So retellings of fairy tales, mythology. If we find any retellings of classic literature or Shakespeare, that would be amazing, and we'll just do another one of these episodes. Thanks so much, Shami.
Hello.
And you know what? It's fitting because you're like an encyclopedia of this sort of thing. At least I feel like it.
Yep, I'm always the one with the list, so.
You are, and we love that. Alright, so I have a rather short list at this point because I mean, let's face it, retellings, as popular as I feel like it is amongst readers, it is kind of a niche topic. And you throw in the fact that they are specifically asking for us to read Hawaiian authors for obvious reasons. That, as sad as that is, it does make it even more niche, I feel like, unfortunately.
Yeah, I have a book called Children's Stories from Around the World where they focus on really small, like, folklore tales, like The Woman Who Yelled at the Moon and Became the Moon.
I think I've heard of that story, yeah.
But yeah, it's really obscure, and I feel like even if it is in the public domain, not very many people know about it. So I guess this is a way of promoting, like, traditional folklore.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of promoting traditional folklore, that was perfect. It's almost like you read the list or something. First item on our list is The Water of Cain and Other Legends of the Hawaiian Islands by Oliver Kinney, Mary Kawina Pukui, and Caroline Curtis. So this just basically seems to be a bunch of stories from Hawaiian folklore, basically. And as you had said, there's just certain stories that a lot of people, especially here in the West, that you just wouldn't know because we're not really exposed to the myths and legends of anybody who isn't Greek or Roman or even
Egyptian.
Just, yeah, that too. But even Egypt doesn't get nearly as much attention, unfortunately. But yeah, so I think that's a really great way to get started to kind of familiarize people with Hawaiian folklore in times like this. Okay, next up on the list, A Cave Witch Valentine by Kauala. So this one's interesting. It is erotica. So if anybody who isn't of age is listening to this, sorry, I am not going to be recommending this to you. Admittedly, this one was interesting because it says it is about the goddess Hel. So I was thinking, okay, so the Norse goddess of death, but here it says she's the goddess of blood and war, so I actually had to look that up because I always thought of her just as the goddess of death, but, you know, with mythologies, a lot of the times there'll be a lot of overlap. So let's see. It does seem like she is just the goddess of the underworld, so I don't know if they're just making adjustments
to underworld and decay. That's what they're saying here.
Yeah, so you know what? I mean, war does indeed cause a lot of death and decay, so perhaps that it was the intention here. And it's just a bunch of short stories. It specifically says quirky, high steam, why choose polyamory novella romance involving a retired ancient war goddess who barters with mortals. So that sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. It could be a nice quick read because with only 2 weeks, we definitely need all the quick read for this.
When you said the why choose polyamory thing with ancient war goddess, like at the rate where like Jiranje Zhao's books are going with Iron Riddle and then Heavenly Tyrant, I feel like that's the path that Wu Zetian's gonna go.
Yeah, I do remember that they had hinted that Wu Zetian's gonna get another love interest in the next one, and I'm so excited for Heavenly Tyrant, oh my goodness. The first book was one of my favorite books that I read last year, period. I have come to find that I quite enjoy a good polyamory story because, you know what, love triangles are kind of played out if you ask me.
Yep.
Alright, now this one was interesting. So it's called Pua's Kiss by Lehua Parker. This one's inspired by The Little Mermaid. And I do love the tagline. It's, when you're dating a nihui shark in human form, there's no such thing as a casual Hawaiian fling. That just sounds like fun. And it's actually starring a groom who was left at the altar, which I don't think you really hear about that much, in spite of the fact you hear a lot.
That gets jilted.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sure, you hear about runaway brides, but usually in those stories, the groom is not the focus, the bride is. So you don't really hear about the jilted grooms very often. So he's just trying to kind of enjoy his honeymoon alone, poor thing. And he runs into this woman named Pua, who is a shape-shifting niue shark. I had never even heard of this concept before. But yeah, this author's actually written a whole bunch of books within this universe. And this seems to be the story of how the protagonists of another...
So it's basically like a series. Like, I found out what nihui means. The term that refers to any man-eating shark. So the general term for shark is mano.
Okay.
Or mano. I don't really know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but there's that,
please forgive us, folks. Neither of us are Hawaiian.
Yeah.
We're trying. But yeah, so this is basically how the parents of one of the protagonists meet. And it does look like there's also... So it is also book one of the Laueli Fractured Folktales, reimagined stories inspired by the world's oldest tales, retold with a Hawaiian twist. So that's really intriguing. Like,
interesting that, like, the mom is the shapeshifter, because usually in these kind of stories, it's the father that's the shapeshifter, and then the mom's human.
You know, that is so true. You don't really see jilted grooms very often, and you don't really see that very often.
Yeah.
This looks like it could be a lot of fun, especially since it's not even really like the traditional Little Mermaid story where, she's pining and has to try to win him. At least from this description here on Storygraph, it looks like it's kind of a mutual flirtation that just kind of becomes more than either of them bargained for. So I am definitely intrigued by this. And also the rest of her books, because this leads into the One Boy, No Water story. His name is Zader, and basically he's dealing with the fact that he is a shark shapeshifter. So next up we got a couple of books by Tay Keller, who is of Korean descent, but she did grow up in Hawaii, so she counts. So first is the Mihi Ever After series, which is about a little girl who's obsessed with fairy tales and ends up going into a fairy tale world. Editor Jasmine here, I do want to make it clear that Shamila was the first one to bring up how it reminded her of times when little girls who aren't white are told they can't be princesses. She was the one who said it. The only reason I had to nix it is because it led to us discussing something that could be considered struck work, and I am trying to toe the line here. Additionally, I have made the decision, every time I have to cut something for discussing struck work, I am donating $1 to the Creators Fund, because at this rate, we could absolutely help feed some actors. And now back to the podcast. But yeah, I definitely was thinking exactly that sort of thing. It's just like, what did they tell her that because she was Asian? It seems like that. Most likely. I don't, like, even if it's not in the text itself, it would not surprise me at all. So, very nice that within the narrative, obviously, those assholes are proven wrong. But yep, it's a portal fantasy, because we love a portal fantasy. And they get a chance to learn how to be princesses, but turns out things are a little more complicated than she initially.
Because when you said more than embargoes are, I immediately went into, like, politics.
I mean, I don't know, maybe it's about politics. I will make it clear, none of us have actually read any of the books on this particular list.
This is just pure speculation on my part.
Exactly, yeah. We're just kind of going over some suggestions based off of the premise of this podcast as well as the premise of the challenge. And by the same author, we have When You Trap a Tiger.
Lily's Harmony is sick, and that's just the beginning of her problems. And then a tiger straight from Korean folklore appears and offers her a deal to return where her grandmother stole, and her health will be restored. I'm somehow getting Rumpelstiltskin vibe from this, and I don't know why.
No, I definitely see what you mean, because I feel like whenever a character in folklore is trying to make a deal with you, you should not trust them.
Nope.
Like, there's gonna be some kind of consequence there, and I don't know a lot about Korean folklore, but I get the feeling the same can be said for tigers. You're not really supposed to trust them with this sort of thing. Because, I mean, even in the Storygraph page, it's just like, I don't know. Because deals with tigers are never what they seem, as it said.
Oh, okay. And then there's also the question of what the grandmother stole. It's like...
Right?
Being held responsible for, like, your ancestors' sins and stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that, but you're so right. Like, she's being forced to kind of bear the brunt of it.
The grandma gets to tell her side of the story, because there could be a lot of stuff that's missing.
Absolutely. And weirdly enough, this also vaguely reminds me of... Have you ever heard of the story Lan Po Po?
Lan Po Po.
It's very similar to Little Red Riding Hood. It's set in China.
Oh, wait, the Chinese Red Riding Hood.
Yes.
I heard of that.
Like, for some reason, it reminds me of...
This might be a different version, because there's like a couple of versions of Chinese Red Riding Hoods, and this is not by the same author.
With Lan Po Po, it's very much more of a battle of wits, because I remember in that story, she was very much aware that something was wrong, which Little Red Riding Hood could never.
But the version I read, this was almost like a reverse of it. So it was, in actuality, it was, the oldest sister was Felice, because there's 3 sisters in the story. Okay, the oldest sister, Felice, she realizes that it's a wolf and not the grandmother. And then she gets her sisters to, like, play into this idea, she'll play into tricking the wolf.
Just kind of play along with his game. Yep.
And then, rule of 3, they trick him into, like, they climb up a ginkgo tree, and they trick him into wanting to come up there to get the ginkgo nuts, and they pull him up in a basket 3 times, and then they drop it, like, halfway, and then when he's almost there on the 3rd try, they drop him down, and then he's dead.
Yep. I do remember that fondly, and I guess, like I said, it's, you know, the young girl being face to face with kind of a battle of wits with a predator. So I guess that's why it kind of reminded me of that. That is a solid story, even though it does add into the propaganda against my favorite animal. Anyway, let's get back to the list. The last item on our list is Lay and the Fire Goddess by Malia Mauna. Again, apologies if we mispronounce anybody's names with this. We're doing our best here.
Rule of thumb, you sound out every syllable is what I'm finding out.
Exactly. That is a good tip there. That's what I try to do as well. So this one is really interesting because it's kind of a story of a girl who's kind of reconnecting with her culture in the most traumatic way possible.
And it's Pele, the fire goddess.
Yeah, even I know you do not want to piss off Pele. It does occur to me. This is an interesting choice for a list about this, isn't it? But, yep, you know, she just wants to have a fun vacation, but she accidentally insults the fire goddess.
How?
And
how do you insult a fire goddess?
Pele kidnaps her best friend.
Did you, like, threaten to put water on them? Or, like, spray them like a cat?
No. It looks like she accidentally destroyed her Lehua blossom.
Oh, that will do it.
Yep. With any god or goddess, you do not mess with any of their symbols.
It gives me the same vibe as, like,
so now
breaking,
she's
like, going into the tomb and then getting cursed because you do not mess with the stuff, with their afterlife stuff.
No, God, no. So she ends up battling mythical creatures, teams up with demigods and talking bats, and evades the traps Pele hurls her way. So that sounds like a lot of fun. Like, it says for fans of Moana and the Aru Shah series, but I don't know. It also kind of gives me vaguely Percy Jackson vibes, personally.
Especially with the first book.
Yeah, exactly. And it does look like it's supposed to be a duology. So if you end up liking this one, you can wait for the sequel, I guess. But, yep, that is the end of that list. What do you think, Shami? Or do any of those kind of jump out at you?
The When You Trap a Tiger one, and I think Pua's Kiss, because it's subverting a lot of tropes there.
Yeah, it's a lot of good tropes. And we all know I'm a sucker for a Little Mermaid story. But, yeah. So those are some fun suggestions in case you are looking to join the Read for Maui challenge. I will be adding links to all the information in the show notes. Even if you can't donate or participate, please spread the word, because, God, it is looking awful over there, and anything we could do to possibly help this community would be amazing. I'll be trying to participate myself, in fact, and basically for every book I read, I'm going to have set aside $5, and at the end I'll be splitting the donations between the Maui Mutual Aid Fund and the Lahaina Cultural Center. Any final thoughts, Shami?
Maybe this would be an opportunity for, like, Hawaiian authors to, like, do their own adaptations of things that they want to do. Like, if they read classic books growing up and felt that they weren't represented, they could go the route that I did and make their own.
Yeah, absolutely. We always want to highlight the voices that weren't always heard in the Western canon. Absolutely. Once again, we were talking about the hashtag Read for Maui challenge. Please join or spread the word or even donate if you possibly can. Once again, I will be putting all the relevant links in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.